The salt air clung to me like a second skin as I hauled my suitcase up the creaking wooden steps of my rented cottage. The gulls wheeled and screamed overhead, indifferent to my exhaustion. I'd been on the road for hours, escaping a life that had worn me down to nothing but frayed nerves and empty canvases. Inside, the cottage smelled like old wood and forgotten stories. The furniture was mismatched, worn but charming. A small desk sat by the window, its surface nicked and scratched from years of use. It was perfect. I'd come here to start over, to paint again, to breathe. Rain began to patter against the windows as I unpacked, and by evening, it had escalated into a full-blown storm. The wind howled through the cracks in the window panes, carrying whispers I tried to ignore. That's when I saw it, a faint glow in the distance. Through the rain-slicked window, the neighboring house came into focus. It was grander than the others in this sleepy little town, perched high on the cliff like it was keeping a secret. I hadn't noticed it before, and for a moment, I wondered if it was real. Then the light flickered, and a figure appeared in the window watching. I told myself to look away, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic about the way they stood, as if they'd been waiting for me. The storm roared, but I barely heard it. And then, as suddenly as they appeared, they were gone, leaving nothing but the ghost of their presence behind. My chest tightened. The reclusive writer. I'd heard the whispers in town earlier today. A man who rarely left his house, whose words once moved the world, but who now lived in the shadows. I didn't know why, but I felt drawn to him. And something deep inside me whispered that he was waiting for me to make the first move. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the town cloaked in a gray mist. I brewed a pot of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth as I leaned against the counter. My gaze drifted to the window, to the neighboring house, and the questions that had settled and overnight churned restlessly in my mind. Who was he? And why did it feel like he knew me? I told myself I wouldn't go. I had work to do. The blank canvas sitting on the easel in the corner taunted me, daring me to pick up a brush and fail all over again. But instead of reaching for my paints, I found myself putting on my coat and stepping out into the crisp morning air. The walk to the house felt longer than it should have, each step weighed down by hesitation. When I finally reached the heavy oak door, I raised my hand to knock, but it opened before I made contact. He stood there, taller than I'd expected, with dark hair that brushed just past his collar. His eyes, sharp and piercing, locked onto mine, and I felt the words die in my throat. "I thought you'd come sooner," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something I couldn't place. I frowned. "Do we know each other?" "Not yet," he replied, stepping aside to let me in. The interior of the house was both cozy and chaotic. Books were stacked on every available surface, their spines worn and titles faded. Papers littered the desk by the window, along with a cup of cold tea and a pen that had leaked ink across the wood. "Why are you here?" he asked, closing the door behind me. The question caught me off guard. I moved into the cottage next door," I said. "I saw your light last night. I just wanted to introduce myself." A flicker of a smile tugged at his lips, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Introduce yourself," he echoed, as if the idea amused him. "Yes," I said, straightening. "I'm Rowan. I'm an artist." At that, his expression shifted, though I couldn't tell if it was surprise or something darker. He crossed the room to a low bookshelf, pulled out a thin leather journal, and handed it to me without a word. I opened it cautiously, the pages soft with age. My breath caught as I saw what was inside. Sketches. My sketches. Ones I had done years ago, when I was still in art school. Private pieces I'd never shared with anyone. "How?" I stammered, looking up at him. "You dropped something once," he said quietly. "Years ago, when you were walking through the city. I picked it up and kept it. I thought I'd never see you again, but now." He gestured vaguely, as if the universe had made the decision for us. My chest tightened, a strange mix of wonder and unease flooding through me. "Why didn't you return it?" He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "Because I didn't think you were ready to know who you were." I stared down at the sketches, my hands trembling slightly. The soft graphite lines, the hurried strokes of my younger self, were unmistakable. These were pieces I had drawn in moments of raw emotion, when the world felt too much or not enough. "How?" My voice broke, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "How did you even know they were mine? People lose things in the city all the time." His gaze softened, though there was still something guarded in his expression. "I didn't. Not at first. But I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. There was something in those sketches, something I recognized. Recognized? I snapped, clutching the journal tighter. You don't even know me. Don't I? His words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of a challenge. A beat of silence passed, and I felt the prickle of anger rise. How dare he? Those sketches were mine, pieces of my soul, spilled onto paper in a way words never could express. And he'd kept them, hidden them away like some sort of secret treasure. I don't understand, I said finally, my voice low and uneven. Why me? Why keep them? Why now? He turned toward the window, his profile etched in the morning light. Outside, the mist curled along the cliffs like something alive. Because they spoke to me, he said almost to himself. They said things I'd forgotten how to say. Things I thought no one else understood. I wanted to argue, to demand an explanation that made sense. But his words struck a chord I couldn't ignore. I knew what it felt like to pour yourself into something and pray, that someone somewhere might understand it. Who are you? I asked, softer this time. He hesitated before answering. Nathan. Nathan Hale. The name tickled the edges of my memory, familiar yet just out of reach. He must have seen it on my face because he gave a rueful smile. I used to write, he said. Once. Before it all fell apart. I knew then why his name rang a bell. Nathan Hale. The reclusive novelist whose books had captured the hearts of millions before he disappeared from the public nearly a decade ago. His last book had been. My stomach dropped. His last book had been about an artist. A lonely, struggling artist who found solace in her work and nowhere else. My hands tightened on the journal. Did you write about me? His gaze met mine again, steady and unflinching. Not then. But maybe I was always waiting for you to show up. The air between us grew heavier, charged with a tension I couldn't quite place. I didn't know whether to feel betrayed or intrigued by his words. Waiting for me to show up? What did that even mean? It felt like he was offering pieces of a puzzle without giving me the picture. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. So, you've been waiting for an artist? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Not just any artist, he replied softly, his eyes scanning my face as if searching for something. Someone who could see what I couldn't write anymore. My heart skipped. What did that mean? A silence stretched between us, and I wanted to fill it with words, questions, accusations, anything, but instead, I found myself staring at the journal in my hands, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. It was as if I could feel the years of secrets and unsaid things pressed between the pages. Nathan's gaze never left me. You've been running, Rowan, he said quietly. From your past, from your work, from what you really want. I can see it in your eyes. I felt a sharp pang in my chest. He was right, in a way. I'd left the city behind, buried memories of a failed career, and a broken heart in the rubble of my old life. I hadn't painted in years, not really, not with passion or purpose. But what did he know of running? What right did he have to say these things? I didn't come here for therapy, I said, biting back the frustration that threatened to rise. I came here to paint, to find myself again. And I'm telling you, Nathan said, his voice steady but insistent, you won't find anything by running. His words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't want to admit it, but deep down I knew it was true. I'd been hiding from something, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? Nathan turned away from me, his gaze drifting to the view beyond the window, where the ocean churned angrily against the rocks. I want you to stop hiding, he said, his back to me. I want you to paint. I want you to finish what you started. And maybe, just maybe, I'll help you finish what I started too. I didn't understand. What did he start? What did I start? Before I could ask another question, Nathan turned back to face me, his eyes softer than before. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Rowan, he said, his voice raw. But I think you know deep down that I didn't keep your sketches because I wanted to hold them over you. I kept them because they were the last thing I had that felt real. His words hit me like a slow burn. I was tempted to argue, to insist that I didn't need him, didn't need anyone, but the truth, buried deep inside me, whispered otherwise. I don't know if I can do this, I said, the admission breaking something open inside me. I don't know if I can go back to who I was. Nathan stepped closer, his presence steady and grounding. You're not going back, Rowan. You're just remembering who you are. I didn't have an answer for him. But something in the way he spoke, like he'd seen my soul bare and unfiltered, made me feel like maybe, just maybe, I could try. The silence between us lingered, charged and heavy, until it felt almost suffocating. Nathan didn't press me further, didn't try to fill the space with more words. Instead, he waited patiently, as though he knew that I needed time to process, to decide. I shifted on my feet, unsure of what to do with the weight of his gaze still resting on me. I wanted to push him away, to tell him to mind his own business, but there was something in the quiet strength he exuded that kept me rooted to the spot. Finally, I broke the silence. What happens now? The words were hesitant, unsure, like I was testing the waters of something I wasn't ready to face. Nathan's expression softened, a trace of something almost like understanding in his eyes. "You paint," he said simply. "You start where you left off. And I'll be here. To help if you want it." I looked at the journal in my hands, then back at him. His offer, whatever it was, felt too easy, too simple. But in that simplicity, there was a kind of relief I hadn't expected. "I don't know if I can trust you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "You've been hiding these sketches for years, Nathan. What am I supposed to believe?" Nathan didn't flinch. "Trust doesn't come easy, I know that. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself." A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Trust myself." I shook my head, looking down at the journal again. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're not alone in that," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Most people don't know who they are until they start looking. But you're here now. You've already started, Rowan." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. The walls I'd spent so long building, brick by brick, were starting to crack. It scared me. More than anything, it terrified me. "Why do you care?" I asked suddenly, the question slipping out before I could censor it. "Why are you trying to help me?" Nathan hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something raw, almost painful. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "I've been where you are," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "I've been stuck, waiting for something to change, for someone to help me figure out who I was. And I've spent years hiding from it. But when I saw your sketches, when I saw the person you were then, I knew you could get out. You just need someone to remind you." The raw honesty in his words hit me harder than anything else he'd said. I felt a flicker of something deep inside me, a spark I hadn't realized was still there. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't be ready. Not yet. "I need time," I said, the words more for myself than for him. Nathan nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." I looked at the journal one more time, the sketches that had haunted me for years now in my hands. Maybe I could try again. Maybe I could stop running. But for now, all I could do was sit in the quiet of his study, holding the past in my hands, wondering if I could finally face it. The days that followed felt like a blur. I tried to paint, I really did. The blank canvas in my cottage seemed to mock me at every turn. I'd start a piece, then pause, the brush hovering above the surface as doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the weight of Nathan's words, couldn't stop thinking about the things he'd seen in me that I didn't even know existed. Each time I picked up my brushes, the memories of the sketches in the journal returned, those raw, unfiltered pieces of myself I had buried deep. They weren't just drawings, they were fragments of a life I had abandoned. The artist I had been. I tried to push it all aside. I told myself I wasn't ready to go back, that the past should stay in the past. But no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, Nathan's quiet insistence haunted me. "Trust yourself." It was easy to pretend that I didn't need anyone, to tell myself that I could figure it out on my own. But it wasn't working. One evening, when the sky outside was painted with the hues of a setting sun, I found myself walking toward his house again. It wasn't planned, but my feet seemed to know the way. When I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, then knocked, my heart pounding in my chest. Nathan opened the door almost immediately, as if he had been expecting me. He didn't say anything at first, just stepped aside to let me in, his expression unreadable. I glanced around the room, taking in the bookshelves, the desk cluttered with papers, the half-empty mug of tea. But it was the emptiness in the air that struck me the most. The quiet, like something was waiting to be spoken. "I'm not ready," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Nathan didn't answer right away. He simply walked to the window, gazing out at the ocean, his back turned to me. "No one is ever ready, Rowan," he said quietly. "But sometimes you don't get to choose when you're ready. Sometimes you have to take a step forward even when you don't know where it will lead." His words hung in the air between us, heavy with something unsaid. I could feel the weight of them pressing on me, making it harder to breathe. I'm scared, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. Nathan turned back toward me, his gaze steady and understanding. I know you are. I felt a twinge of frustration mixed with relief. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm running from. His eyes softened, a flicker of something darker passing across his face. He crossed the room to where I stood, closing the distance between us until we were only a few feet apart. You're right, he said quietly. I don't know everything, but I know what it feels like to run, to hide from the parts of yourself you're afraid to face. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze, searching for something, an answer, an explanation. His face was open now, no longer hidden behind the walls I had once believed were impenetrable. I wasn't always like this, Rowan, Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I used to believe in everything. In my writing. In my purpose. But I lost it. I lost myself in the noise, in the things I couldn't control. And then I lost the will to fight. The words hung in the air, raw and vulnerable, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in Nathan's perfect facade. He wasn't just a reclusive writer, he was a man who had been broken like me. I don't want to be broken anymore, I said softly. But I don't know how to fix it. Nathan reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before it rested gently on mine. The contact sent a shiver through me, a strange mix of comfort and uncertainty. You don't have to fix it, he said. You just have to let it be. Let yourself be. And maybe together we can figure out how to start again. I looked at him then, really looked at him. He wasn't just offering me his help. He was offering me his understanding. The same kind of understanding I'd longed for, without even realizing it. And for the first time since I'd arrived in this quiet town, I felt the tiniest spark of hope. Not for the person I used to be, but for the person I could still become. The days that followed that evening in Nathan's study were strangely quiet, but beneath the stillness was a shift, a subtle, growing awareness that neither of us could ignore. I spent more time at my easel, the canvas gradually filling with shapes and colors I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I didn't know what I was painting, but somehow it felt like the right thing to do. Nathan, too, seemed to retreat into his own world, though not completely. He still left small notes for me, sometimes a line from a book he thought I should read, other times a simple observation about the weather. The small gestures felt like the thread pulling us closer, despite the space we both kept. It was a Wednesday morning when it all came to a head. I'd been painting all night, the light of my desk lamp a quiet companion. There was a knock on the door, unexpected and urgent. I wiped my hands on the back of my jeans and answered it, half expecting it to be a neighbor or maybe someone from town. But it wasn't. It was Nathan. He stood there, a frantic energy in his step, his eyes wild as if he hadn't slept. His hair was tousled, his jacket unbuttoned. "Rowan," he said, his voice tight. "You need to come with me." "Now." "Why?" I asked, confusion surging through me. I was still processing the stillness of our interactions over the past week. "Please," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I need you." "There's no time to explain." His eyes flickered toward the window, as though something was lurking outside, something too close. "Just trust me." I hesitated for only a moment before I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside with him, the cold air biting my skin. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, casting the world in a pale, eerie light. Nathan didn't speak as he led me through the winding streets toward the cliffs. I felt an odd sense of unease, the air thick with something I couldn't name. The familiar surroundings of the coastal town, once so serene, now felt foreign, almost sinister. When we reached the edge of the cliff, the wind howled, making it difficult to hear each other. Nathan turned to face me, his gaze intense. "I need you to listen carefully," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "This isn't just about us, Rowan. This isn't just about your art or my past. There's something much bigger at play here, something that's been waiting for you, waiting for both of us." I took a step back, trying to understand his words. "What do you mean?" "Nathan, what's going on?" He grabbed my arm, his fingers firm. "You've been having dreams, haven't you?" I blinked, surprised by the question. "What? No, I don't." "You have," he insisted. "I've seen it. The same dreams I've been having. They're not just dreams, Rowan. They're memories. Memories of something that happened before we were born." I pulled back, shaking my head. "This is insane. What are you talking about?" "I can't explain it all now," he said, his voice ragged with urgency. But you have to trust me. Whatever it is that's been pulling us together, it's bigger than us. We're supposed to be here, together in this moment. You and me, Rowan. This is your choice. The wind carried his words into the vast nothingness of the ocean, and for a moment I stood there paralyzed, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Then, as though some part of me that had been dormant suddenly awoke, the answer came to me. I've been running, I whispered, almost to myself. Nathan nodded. We both have. A long silence passed between us, stretching until the weight of it seemed almost unbearable. The sun had risen higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the rocky cliffs, as if marking the moment in time. I'm ready, I said quietly, but my voice rang clear in the stillness. I'm ready to stop running. Nathan's gaze softened, and for the first time, I saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes, something I recognized. It was the same fear, the same uncertainty I'd been hiding from for so long. And in that moment, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. The decision to step into the unknown, to face what we had been running from, was both terrifying and freeing. It was the first step in what would become a new beginning for both of us. As the weeks passed, the town slowly revealed its secrets, things I had never noticed before, but Nathan had known all along. Together, we unlocked the mysteries of our past, our shared dreams, and what had been pulling us to this place. In the end, it wasn't just about the art or the books, or even the connection between us. It was about something much bigger, something that had been waiting for us to find it. And when we did, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the start of everything.
And that concludes the end of this audiobook. Please like, share, and subscribe for more, and see you on my next free audiobook.